sucks. It doesn't suck, but it's like, you know what I mean? You're
Different things could be said about that, but.
What? What'd you say?
Go ahead. Oh, I didn't know who. I was just like, different things could be taken from that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not trying to take it for granted, like, you know what I mean? But also, I'm just like, it would kind of would have been a relief to know, like, all of us have already been exposed and like, we're all fine, you know?
Yeah. As someone who, like Victoria, frequently goes on WebMD to check the symptoms after I make my trip to the grocery store, I'm like, have I contracted someone?
Yeah. I'm
surprised.
With you. Yep. Surprised. All right. I'm going to post the link in Slack.
Sweet.
Okay. And then we can.
You guys see us yet?
We are there. I can see us. 3 watching.
Oh.
Is it 3 of us? One of it's me, I think.
Oh.
One of them's me.
Nice. 5 watching. Boom slam. For whatever reason, Slack is making me sign all the way back in. I don't know why this is.
That's been one of the reasons why I haven't been on Slack as much. I'm trying not to go as much. I think, Marie, you inspired me last week. Boundaries. I was like, oh, yes, it's very consuming.
I was off yesterday, and then today I went back through.
Jackie, how's the office?
Great. The office is my home.
Honestly, if I had Marie's office, I'd take it in a heartbeat. Like, that couch looks so comfy.
Y'all, it's like my parents, like friends were like, oh, we don't have room in our house. Like, can you guys just keep it? So it's in my parents' basement until they want it. But my real desk is next to me where I work.
Yeah. I was going to say, Victoria, just take me on a tour of my new home.
I'm in Minnesota right now, so I can't do that.
Never mind.
So what the camera does not show, which, you know, images can be deceiving, is my entire closet emptied out onto the floor with things going back to like 2nd grade. So we cleared the screen a little bit.
Nice. All right. So yeah, I agree. We should do intros again. So who wants to start? Let's just do like a quick intro, like your name, where you're from, what you do, and if your parish, I guess, how did you like get in touch with St. Al's? Yeah. I guess I'll go first. My name is Mary Kate. I work for Illinois Right to Life. I'm in my office right now. I've got like pro-life signs hanging up behind me. I am from Joliet, Illinois, which is about 45 minutes south on a good day, 45 minutes south on a coronavirus day, as we're now saying. There's no traffic. 45 minutes south of the city. And what was the other thing I said I was going to say? St. Al's. So my sister is married to Tom Kelly, who used to be the board president, a young adult ministry board president at St. Al's 3 years ago. And also Melanie Wood is one of my best friends, and she got me hooked up with St. Al's back in like 2016. I can't believe it's been that long. So yeah, that's how I got hooked up with St. Al's. Who's next?
I'll go. My name is Jackie. I am from Steubenville, Ohio. And yes, I did go to Franciscan. I work in pro-life work as well. I work in development for Aid for Women here in Chicago. And I got hooked up with St. Al's by a friend who also went to Franciscan, who moved to the area, inviting me to join a women's group, which is also how I met Mary Kate. And then I stuck around at St. Al's.
Nice.
I can jump off of Jackie since I am the new face here. Hi, I'm Victoria. I originate from a suburb of St. Paul, Minnesota, which is where I currently am hanging out with my parents for a little bit, escaping Chicago and small apartments. I work for Morningstar, the financial research company, which is surprising to everyone who knows me because I was an English major, so I'm still not sure how that happened. And in terms of St. Al's, I moved to Chicago, not really knowing anything about the geography of the area, and St. Al's was in walking distance, so I became a parishioner.
Nice. That's divine providence at work, man.
It really worked out quite well.
That's awesome.
Marie?
Marie?
All right, sure. So my name's Marie Aside. I am from Atlanta. Step aside. I'm from Atlanta, where I currently am in my parents' basement on this amazing comfy couch. And I moved up to Chicago in December of last year. So long story short, ended up there. God brought me there. I just switched offices with my same company. My best friend's boyfriend actually is from Matamidi, Minnesota, outside of St. Paul, I guess. And he lived in Chicago at the time, the last few years, and he had gone to St. Al's. So he had recommended that I go there once I moved up. And then I ended up getting plugged in. I just went to some honestly random events that I saw in the email and on Facebook. So just walk up to people and really been blessed with the community that I've gotten to know.
Nice.
Yeah. So I guess I can go next since there's no one else left. I'm Priyanka. I go by Pri. I work in healthcare communications, similar to Victoria. I don't know how I ended up there, but I did know that I wanted to do public relations. And yeah, I got plugged in. Oh, I'm from Gurnee, Illinois. So 45 minutes north on a good day or a COVID day, I suppose. And I got plugged into St. Al's. I went to Loyola University, and then afterwards I moved to Wrigley. So I was like church shopping, I suppose, as they put it nowadays, and came across how beautiful St. Al's was and just started going. And then my friend Michelle McAvoy got me plugged in with the social committee and have not looked back since.
Nice. Thanks, guys. So last week we talked about insecurity, just in general, like female insecurity. And we kind of delved into a little bit with regards to like mental health or mental, like, mental, what is the word I'm looking for? Marie, you had said it like mental health isn't really the right way to say it.
Yeah. No. So like mental illness, right? So things we struggle with, right?
I'm sorry. Yeah. Mental illness. Yeah. So we had like kind of started to touch a little bit on body image. And I think we intended in the beginning to talk about body image, and then it just didn't really happen with the way that the conversation went. But we all kind of agreed that this is a major hot topic, I think, for women in general nowadays, especially with the prevalence of social media and Instagram. And I think pornography plays a role in this, which, is like one of the favorite topics of Slack, I think. So that's what we want to talk about today, is we want to dive a little bit deeper into body image, why women struggle with this, how specifically like the ways that women struggle with it, and how God has really spoken into our lives as, the five of us, in terms of like, how has God contributed to like a healthy way of like viewing ourselves and our bodies that's consistent with how he created us. So I think it's good, especially as I've said before, like I know there are a lot of men who hang out in the chat, and that's great. And we love that. So I think it would be really good first and foremost to define the problem. So what are we actually talking about when we are talking about a woman struggling with her body image? I think that the immediate thing that comes to mind for people is like women who feel like they're fat, because that's just like the classic like example, like you'll hear things about men and women in relationships. Like, if a woman ever asks you if her jeans make her look fat, you always don't look and just always say no. Like things like that, like we hear those jokes. So what are some of the ways that, what does that actually mean to say that like a woman struggles with body image? And how does that hit home for each of us as individuals?
Well, I'll answer the first part of the question for now. I think it is more to do with just feeling like you're too fat, although that is a big part of it. I think a lot of it is we don't feel like our bodies fit into the mold that society has put up as the ideal female figure, which has changed throughout history. There's definitely a prominent figure right now that just genetically, no matter how much we work out or what we eat or whatever, we're not going to fit into. But society does a really good job of just displaying this perfect looking figure through media, now social media, the modeling industry. We're inundated constantly with these images that we just can't fit into. And so we don't think our bodies really are good enough because they don't match this image.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it can be literally anything. Like there are things about a woman's body that she'll pick out and feel self-conscious about, that other women will look at her and be like, oh, I wish that like this, my body looked that way, or you know what I mean? Which is very funny. Like that should tell us something, I think, about how the devil really like enters into the way that we perceive ourselves with some of these things. Any other like thoughts about that? I mean, what are some of the different, I don't know, what do you guys think contributes to this? Like, is it, go ahead, Marie, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say like just kind of another way that I've thought of it is almost like the way that I define beauty is how I see like my body, right? So like I define beautiful as a woman who looks like X, right? And I think to Jackie's point, sometimes that comes from society, or that's honestly how like it's a combination, I think, of my own viewing of that and what other people say, like, oh, that girl's really pretty, or that person's really beautiful, right? So when people say these things, it starts to shape in your own mind of how then you perceive other people's bodies, which then in turn, without us even realizing it, affects how we see our own bodies, right? So I think it's a pretty variant term that, you know, there isn't this one size fits all, I think, as every girl kind of knows when it comes to quote unquote your body. But a lot of it I've noticed is defined by kind of how I see beauty drives it.
Yeah.
Just jumping off Marie's comment, I definitely agree with that. I remember, I don't know, I was probably 16, 17, and some guy friend of mine, I don't know, we were just like talking somewhere in the car. He like made some comment about, I don't know, some trait that like wasn't attractive in a woman. And it was like some sort of physical characteristic. And that comment just stuck with me for years because it was like a trait that I had, you know, and it wasn't necessarily something that like people would know, but it always stuck in my mind of like, oh my gosh, like, is this not normal? Like, is this something that people think about when they look at other people? And, you know, even just that one comment staying in my head, you know, I can remember it now. And this was, you know, 8 years ago. It just, it really shows how, you know, even offhand things can shape. We don't even need a visual in front of us, you know, showing us what we should look like. We can hear it, you know, whether people are trying to be funny or not, or be genuine. It sticks with you.
Yeah,
Totally.
For sure.
that is so true. It was a really big thing in my house when I was growing up. So I had a family member, like an extended family member, who it's like really a big part of her story, that she was like very, very overweight growing up during a time that like people really weren't overweight. Isn't that funny how like it's really been the last 30 years that people are like as consistently overweight as they are? But anyway, she like really, really, that really defined her childhood. And as a result, it really defined my mom's childhood, was like observing that. And so there was a lot of conversation in my family growing up in a couple different directions. I mean, there was a lot of positive conversation about like, we never, ever, ever poke fun at someone for their outward appearance. Like that is off the table. We never call people fat. We never call people ugly. Like that is not funny. It's not a joke. It's off the table. And that was always really positive. I actually think that like really bred in me this, like, I was that kid who like fought back with the bullies, you know, like I remember like in grade school, like kids picking on other kids. And I was like, you know, praise God, I was like that kid who like kind of put myself in the middle, because that just like created a fire in my belly when I would see that. But then on the other side, it did also create this like very negative dialogue that was a struggle for me, and I think, you know, maybe for my sisters too, but in different ways. Like that became so heightened that it was like such an anxiety inducing topic of like, you know, I remember I like really was always worried about my weight growing up, like just super worried about it. And I remember years after high school looking back at, I don't know if you guys have maybe had this experience, like you look back at a photo of yourself 10 years before. I remember pulling out this photo of myself from my freshman year homecoming. And I remember that day, like I remember feeling like I was the fattest girl in the room that day. And I look at that photo of myself and I'm like, holy mackerel. Not only was I not fat, someone should have tossed me something to eat. Like, which sounds so like it's not, I guess, I mean, I should be careful about that because you don't want to like, I don't want to make people feel bad about the opposite. But point being, like, I think that we have such a, I think with women, when we're talking about body image, we have such a distorted view of our own bodies, almost to the point that you really can't see yourself for, like, you really can't see yourself the way other people, you just will never see yourself the way other people see you ever. Which I just think is like a very important element, like going into this conversation, that like each woman has that in a different and very unique way. And it's like in a very specific way tailored to her and her body that is so like unreachable by other people. Like I think you could be validated by every single person in the room and still feel like there's something wrong with you. Isn't that like, don't we hear this all the time with like supermodels and stuff? Like supermodels are some of the most insecure people on the planet. So yeah, that's my comment about that. Any other comments about that?
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating to me, just thinking about the insecurities that we have and talking about that and last week and then bridging into this week's conversation about body dysmorphia and how people, all women in some aspect or another, have that like insecurity about their bodies. And a lot of it does come from, it comes externally, but like we internalize it so much, like the mass media and all of that come, like social media now. Like I know I scroll through it and I'm guilty of Instagram, like scrolling, and I'll come across something like today. Apparently Adele broke the internet because she's been on this weight loss journey, right? And so,
whoa, I didn't even know that happened today. Really?
yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's just super.
Yeah.
That's super timely. Okay, keep going. I'm sorry.
No, it just like, it blew my mind thinking about how crazy that is, that like she'd only posted an Instagram post, I guess, on her birthday and celebrating like all the things that she's looking forward to and like committing to possibly dropping an album in September later this year, right? And most people are just so fixated on what she looked like. And even if you aren't like posting about like your weight loss journey, because there's a lot of fitness instructors and stuff like that, like you'll find it if you seek it out.
Totally.
That was just so interesting to me. It like blew my mind that she's so accomplished. She's like God knows how many Grammys she's won, and like her music is, I guess, timeless at this point. Some may argue. And so that being said, like people are just so fixated on her body and her journey, which technically should be personal. And people do compare that. And to me, I thought of, well, on the other side, if there's a girl who's struggling with her weight, what if she's thinking about, you know, like, well, if she could do it, then why can't I do it? Not really knowing their personal struggles and their medical history and what have you. I just thought that was really interesting.
What do you guys think that is? Like, what, I ponder this a lot. Like, what is it about women? Whether it's like something to do with the way God made us, or like something to do with the fall, like what is it that there is this great emphasis on outward appearance with women? Whether it's like this emphasis we place on ourselves, or even like men do it too. Like men are, sorry guys, but like men are so guilty of like going straight to what a woman looks like. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we see it throughout all of society that women have just been so ultra sexualized and so much focus has been put on our bodies. Whereas I know that men struggle as well, but for a woman to feel worthy, it's been like kind of insinuated that she needs to be pretty, she needs to fit this certain mold. Whereas for men, there are other things that can make them seem successful, such as their career or their intelligence. But for women, there's just such a focus on the way that we look, and that the things we have to say don't really matter if we're not also pretty. And I think it does go back to the fall, Mary Kate, as does most things. I think because women are, as I think John Paul II said, the crown of creation, are just one of the most beautiful things that God created, that the devil really has it to attack us in that way, our beauty and our bodies. So I think he's definitely at work in society attacking us in that way, because women are beautiful, and it is a gift that we've been given from God to be so physically beautiful. And I think the devil wants to attack that and bring us down in that way, for sure.
Amen.
This is kind of back to, I don't know that I have a specific answer for that one, but kind of back to one of your the previous question, Mary Kate, and I think men are guilty, some men, right, of objectifying women, but I also think or just thinking about her appearance the first time you see her. But I think as women, and I'm very guilty of this too, it's one of the first things that I see, right? When you walk into a new party, you literally walk into church, whatever it is, and you notice the girl that looks put together with her clothing, she's trendy, or she's got perfectly straight hair, whatever it is, right? I think it's more than just this weight. I personally haven't struggled with caring too much about pounds or weight or anything like that. And I know a lot of women do, but for me, and I think for some women, it's more the comments we even make to each other, right? So we start defining ourselves by that, right? I know this is silly, but I've had a friend be like, oh, you look so great in that dress or something. And I'm like, thanks. I don't really care, right? So it's we've complimented each other on things that we don't care about, that because it's nice to be complimented, right? But you realize that you define it I want you to compliment me on this one thing that I think is not beautiful about my body, right? And that's the one thing that you're insecure about, but there's so many other things that we can't, it's hard for us to wrap our head around. Our entire body and soul together are beautiful, right? Together. And so, I just think as women too, we can kind of inadvertently encourage that without even realizing it.
Yeah.
I think too, just kind of looking at this from an English major perspective, I think a lot about drawing up characters and visuals. And I mean, it's the natural thing that if you're talking to someone and you're trying to describe someone they don't know, you're probably going to start describing their physical appearance. So be like, oh, that one person, in class who has this color hair, or she's this tall, or whatever descriptor that you want to use. But that's going to clue someone in. That's a very natural social thing. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, within reason. But I think a lot about, especially reading classic literature and watching the transition through time. I mean, historically there were more male writers for a longer period of time than women writers, and I know there's a lot of funny posts these days about how male authors write female characters, and it's almost comical how they describe women. But I do think a lot of that goes a long way back, in that it was so normal for so long that you're writing about women as these kind of not even earthly, heavenly characters. Again, not a bad thing, but looking especially at older literature, you have a lot of these descriptors that are very unrealistic, but very common, especially when that was the main people who were putting out content at that time.
That's such an interesting point, because I actually think that if we went back and read some of those things, and then I would love to see a picture of the woman that was being described next to the descriptors that the man used. Because isn't that true about men, that they will be fixated on a woman, and then with other women, which again, I want to be so careful. I don't want to sound as though I'm also, passing judgment on people, but there is this thing with men that men actually, I'm going to make it a positive thing. Men see beauty in women that women do not see, whether it's in themselves or in other women, which is so awesome and so beautiful. And we should listen to them when they express those things. but yeah, I think that like, it's that whole thing, right? Of like women actually dress for themselves or like for each other and not for themselves. I don't really believe that. Like, I think most women are dressing for someone else. Like women are like dressing for other women and they're not really always dressing for men. Which again, I think is very interesting, like given how the world tells us this issue is like plays out. Does that make sense what I'm saying? I don't know.
Yeah,
For sure.
I think so. I mean, just thinking about fashion and the evolution of fashion through not just like the historical periods and whatnot, but the way you dressed and like how modest you were over time, like reflected sometimes like the type of clothing that you wore in society, like showed your class. And over time, like you wanted to be within the like or like the same societal class per se. And now it's more of a way to express your identity or like the things that you believe in. So a lot of people now wear clothing that has words on it or like phrases on it that people will be drawn to or like find some commonalities with. And so people are seeking out people. And like, I think that's why they dress for one another, but also there's a pressure like, oh, I can't wear I can't wear something from like high school, not because it doesn't fit me anymore, but it's like, it's outdated. It's like over 10 years old. And so I won't fit or I won't belong in this community or whatever. And I think that also plays a huge role into it. Like our desire to feel like we belong. So we mold ourselves into societal pressures. And it's not necessarily something that someone tells us to do overtly, but it's like inundated in like a very discreet manner through like mass media and what have you. Yeah.
That's
one thing.
Go ahead, Marie.
That Mary Kate and Victoria, like you touched on, is like writers. And I've also been thinking about like artists, right? So I've mentioned this previously, I implement software. So creativity is not my strong suit at all. And I don't know too much about all the eras of art, but I remember studying it or going to Europe, and women are very, shall I say, plump in a lot of the.
Oh my gosh, I think about that all the time. Okay, keep going.
Like, yeah, like in a lot of the paintings, right? And like, the nude paintings, whatever. And these women just have like rolls all over their body. And, it's like this beautiful image with like the perfect like colors in the painting. But there's something like beautiful when you look at the painting, right? And most people don't see those and like, wow, that woman looks like really ugly and fat. It's like, obviously at the time, like that was beauty, right? It was like, just like who you were and what you look like and how you were. Like, again, I don't know what time period that exactly was, but it's like, where does this originate from? As you were asking, Mary Kate, it's like, it's so interesting to think how it gets redefined from generation to generation even.
Totally.
That is so true.
And like the amount of clothing. So this is my art history coming out, the hardest class I ever took. It's the Baroque style of.
Thank you, Bree.
That women were more plump. In the Renaissance era, though, you would see a lot of women wearing blue because it was an homage to Mary, and like women want to be known as this pure and sanctified creatures. And then the evolution got to less clothing and more on what all the curves were and whatnot. And I think that that's so interesting. Just looking at that, and I want to know where the switch was, where skinny was in and fat was like, or plump, like, because apparently it was considered like a healthier
voluptuous or
something. I don't know.
No, you know what? You're hitting on something that is so interesting to me though, because you're exactly right that like at one time it was more attractive to be, and actually I think different cultures have had different like frames of what's been attractive. But there's definitely this element. I think it's like gosh, I would love to like, this is a whole other side topic. Like you could do a whole episode on this alone, but like so biologically, there are certain features in a woman that men find more appealing because they're like more indicative of like life bearing and the like ability to like, bear children. I can't believe we're talking about this right now.
Oh,
There are things like
birthing hips.
I'm like, you
Yeah.
can't.
Birthing hips. Exactly.
Birthing hips. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is so weird.
Kind of like slump.
And then like, but there has been this shift in our culture, and it, to be honest, like it might line up with like Humane Vitae and the pill, but there's been this shift in our culture of like now what is quote unquote perceived as more attractive is sexual availability. Like how available are you to men sexually? Which is where like the short skirts and the low cut tops and like the super tight, everything come into play.
Basically.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna awkwardly laugh through this whole thing. Okay, anyway, so so I just think that's really interesting what you're saying, that like as styles and fashions have changed over time, but I wouldn't even go that far. I think there's been like an authentic shift in the way that our world views women.
Yeah. I also think, again, just another quick thought, I kind of see it as like American, like standard of women's beauty, right?
Yes.
But like when I've been to Mexico City, like on my mission trips, Peru on my mission trips, like the women there are some of the most confident women I've met in my entire life. They are not in with the trends with fashion. They don't brush their hair. They haven't worn makeup in 10 years. They have really raggedy everything that's really dirty, right? And so, but they're the most beautiful women I've ever met in my life, right? And even from the external. And so it is just very interesting, right? How like women globally, like we see it kind of based on the types of people around us, right? The types of women around us is then our standard of beauty, right? Versus if you're in another country and maybe just the style is different or whatever, you have a different version of beauty and where that came from.
Definitely. Megan asked a really good question in the chat.
Megan,
do you find that certain kinds of purity talks can make women struggle with body image? Ooh, we about to go down a serious modesty. We're opening up that modesty can of worms. Let's go.
Can I kick it off? I have so many thoughts.
Go on.
So, being as succinct as I can, I think that this is something I talk about a lot. I was talking to my mom about this today, but I think that as with anything, there are always going to be extremes. And I think that a lot of things, especially with purity culture, are like really well intentioned and really great and like awesome that message is getting out there. Those are the kind of messages I was receiving. Like I went to all girls high school. It was super empowering. And we had Jason Everett come, like, all this stuff. And it was awesome. However, I think that a lot of that stuff doesn't really address the reality of like living every day to day as a woman and like as women who struggle with like sexual temptation. And I don't want to go down that whole road because that's different than the modesty thing. So I'm going to reel it back in. But with that, I think about a lot of like, looking back at old pictures, kind of like you were saying, Mary Kate. And sometimes I'll tell my mom, I'm like, oh my gosh, why did you let me dress like that? Or like, not to get too am I, but like, I'm clearly like not wearing a bra that fits right because I'm like awkward and going through puberty, like we all were.
Yeah.
And looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, like if I was a mom now and I was looking at like my daughter wearing this stuff, I'd be like, oh my gosh, like you're showing so much skin, you're doing all this. But at the time, you're just trying to figure it out. And like, was I dressing like that for attention? No, I was like, I'm awkward and I don't know how to figure this out. And these are like clothes that fit a year ago and like they should all still be the same now. But then kind of realizing that shift of like your body changing and catching up with that mentally too. So it was never, at least for me, never like, oh, I'm going to dress this way for attention or do this. It was just not understanding what's changing so quickly and, reacting appropriately, if you will. Like in hindsight's everything.
Right.
So I don't know if this is derailing the conversation. Sorry, we can go back to, but I have a question on that and like what parents think about, because like, do you guys think about like how awkward we were in the way we like the clothes that we wore and the way we acted,
all the time.
even the way like we interacted and just whatever. I was looking at high school stuff. I was like, I had a memory post from Facebook a couple of days ago. It was like, delete, like this does not need to be in any circle whatsoever. But that being said, like parents nowadays, like all these like TikTok influencers and stuff, like high schoolers are wearing so much makeup and wearing so much like stuff. Do their parents encourage that? Or like, you know, a lot of people say you wear a lot of makeup for some girls because you're trying to hide or put on a different, like a mask, like your makeup becomes a mask of your identity, or you're trying to perfect or blend through some of the imperfections, quote unquote, that you're finding. So what's your take on that? Like, do you think high schoolers are going through the same awkward phase, or are they just 20 times better and they probably understand that they're growing up in social media, so they understand how to dress? And I didn't.
I think that something's going on that every 14-year-old in this country looks like she's 29.
Yeah.
I actually like Instagram is a very scary place for this reason. Like I have chaperoned the March for Life. I've chaperoned for my high school on the March for Life trip for the last 2 years. And most of the girls on that trip, I would say, are like, dress pretty modestly. And I think if their parents are sending them on a Respect Life trip, then it's, they have like some good parenting happening there. But some of the accounts, like, these girls will start following me on Instagram, and I'll like, be scrolling through their Instagrams, and I'll see like their friends or like, younger sisters of people I went to college with or something. And there are moments that I'm like, oh my gosh, this girl has 7,000 followers on Instagram. And it's clearly because she's not wearing any clothes in any of these pictures. And she is 15 years old. That is alarming. And this isn't like, I don't think these girls know or understand what's happening here when that's the situation. Like, I don't think they fully get it. I think they're thinking like, this is great. I can get a brand deal. Like, I know girls who straight out of high school had, a couple thousand followers on Instagram, and they get brand deals now, and they're dressing like this on Instagram and getting paid to do it. And they're 19.
Gosh.
And it scares. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think that is a major issue. And again, to be honest, I do think that when you are, it does, I don't think we can say across the board that is a reflection of like other things going on in that girl's life. But I think maybe it's an indicator of like some other things going on in that girl's life. Whether it's that like, I think that, sorry, you guys, I have a lot of thoughts about this. I feel that when you are sexually active, the way that you treat your own body is different from women who are not sexually active. And so if you're like actively engaging in sex in some shape or form, and you are aware of how men have the potential to be affected by your body and the power that elicits on men, you are far more likely to wield it and wield it often, especially if you're young. And I think that you don't get that from girls who are engaging in like age appropriate behaviors. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
I don't know if that sounds super judgmental.
Yeah. It makes sense. It makes sense. I think the biggest thing you mentioned there that I would agree with, and from my experience, is that there is something going on deeper, right? Yeah. And like from my own experience, I wasn't wearing all the like super, super skimpy stuff, but I struggled with like some of that, where like I had a cut top that you would buy and you would try it on and it was fine. And then you wear it out to a party and then all of a sudden you're like pulling up your straps like 24/7, right?
Yeah.
So, there's that. And then I obviously know today, there's a lot of the skimpiness, but I volunteered with youth ministry in Atlanta, and, there's so much pressure. And again, we're going on a tangent, but that these teens have today that we did not have X number of years ago. like I have the most incredible parents and they parented me amazingly in the faith. And I still struggled with some of that. Right. And I was not sexually active. I was not engaging in promiscuous things with boys. So I think it's this like innate desire to fit in is where it starts with, right. And to be known and loved is the innate desire. And then it just comes out, especially in popular circles, right. That like, oh, this is what my friends are doing. So I'm just going to like join in on the party. Right. And it took some years to realize like, no, that's not what my worth is about. Right. So yeah, I've seen it be something a bit deeper than that we just don't even know from the outside.
Yeah. I think, Marie, jumping off what you're saying, you know, I do like to give people a benefit of a doubt, but I think growing up just as a whole has changed. And, you know, I think about when I first got social media, you know, my parents' stipulation was like, oh, we're going to make Facebook accounts. And, you know, they never ended up doing that. They didn't have time for that. But, you know, I always told them, I'm like, what do you have to worry about me? You know, the people I'm friends with on Facebook are like my friends and their parents, like my youth minister. You know, it's people who, if they saw anything, I know that they would go right to my parents and say something. And I think that there is, not to tangent, but there is sort of a shift too with one, how busy people are, how busy parents are, how busy kids are. And it's just a different kind of a relationship now where like my parents trusted me and they know that there were people looking out for me on these social media forums, and there were also fewer of them then. Whereas now I think social media is just another thing. It's like if your kid does 3 sports and also they have this TikTok account, and I sound like I'm 80, but you know, like parents can't possibly on the TikTok, but parents can't possibly monitor all of that and keep their kids, you know, balancing all the plates. They couldn't even do that all for me growing up, and my parents raised me great, in my opinion. So I like to think that might be part of the reason that like kids get away with more, so to speak, because there's just no oversight.
Totally.
Yeah. Jackie, do you have anything to say?
I think social media itself is what could be influencing a lot of girls to try to dress and act older than they are. I know for me it was, like Marie said, I wasn't engaging in any promiscuous behaviors in high school, but when I got on Instagram and I saw the girls that were getting the attention and the likes from guys, which I think every girl, especially that age, wants, were the girls that were half naked and were posing sexually. And I thought, well, I guess that's what boys want, and that's what I have to do to fit in or get this, you know, love and attention that I desire. And I mean, that's what influenced me, was that now we have at our fingertips the influence of women that are older than us acting like this, and we see the attention they get. And I didn't have that when I was young. I mean, to look at social media, the different influences. And I think that has made a big difference for younger girls, is to be able to go on and look at the way that celebrities act or models act. And they're like, well, I want to look like that. I want that attention. And then they're just mimicking it. Yeah.
How do you guys think like the very heavy like food and exercise influencer culture like plays into all of this stuff? I mentioned before that like I had struggled with my weight. The first 54-day novena I ever did when I was in like 8th grade was like weight related. That's been like a huge thing in my life. And I think that I remember reading a book in college that was about the relationship between our physical health and our spiritual health, and like that our spiritual reality plays into the way that we see our bodies. And that like really began a transformation of like how I saw myself and how I was able to like love myself in a different way, or, you know, maybe came a little bit closer to seeing myself the way God sees me. So I'm curious, like specific to the like food, the relationship with food, and also like this like very heavy like exercise and like workout influencer culture, like how do you think that impacts women and body image?
So I kind of have a different view on this, possibly, because my roommate is very much so into health and wellness, and she's a influencer of sorts on Instagram. She's a fitness influencer, but I've seen the amount of hard work that she's put into it, and there is like a true art. Like it was a passion point of hers because she was trying to betterment herself, and like the intent behind it was good. And this was just her way of saying, if I post this as like a diary of mine, then then my friends can keep up with the things that I'm suggesting online, and like, then it just kind of took off. But I think, again, when you have too much of a good thing where you're just being inundated or bombarded with that, then that perception, like, you kind of absorb that as your reality, and that's when you have too much of it, and it's overwhelming, and then people start to compare themselves and whatnot. So I think, you know, intentionality and like what your end goal is, and if you're being like positive about it, saying like everyone is on their own journey, and like this is how long I've done this, and being as authentic as you possibly can, then it can be a good thing. But I think the onus is on the influencer themselves. If you are the person who is taking you know, like if you are posting this content, you know that it's not just going to be online for your friends, like that's naive. You need to understand that it will be online for other people to manipulate and use. And so you should understand the repercussions of that and try to be as controlled or as positive as you possibly can be to combat some of the negativity that's going to come with it. Now, don't get me wrong, like you're going to get some trolls and what have you from posting any sort of content, like you're too skinny or you're too fat, like you need to stop, like this is all crap, stuff like that. Like you're going to get bombarded either way. So I think just being intentional and understanding that, like, that's important, and just seeing the behind the scenes. I'm a little bit like more forgiving because I see all of her journey through that. But I think before that, my opinion was very skeptical of it. And I just thought it was really negative, like people just comparing. And I even started following them. I was guilty of this, like following a lot of bloggers and influencers in that space just to see like how I can better improve. That was the intent. But then I started comparing myself. And so that's when you go down the slippery slope.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually fasting from social media for like a little bit of time, and I do that occasionally. And I think with the influencers, there's still some that I can like follow on blogs, is that you personally have to be in a healthy state before you go look at them or you follow them or you desire to have an attribute that they have, right? Whether that's their ripped body or the way that they eat and cook really healthy, right? So that's one thing I think as an end user per se that is really important for me, at least, to be in like a healthy mindset looking at them. But I think there's a lot of positivity that can come out of it if you're looking at it with the right mindset. Like, for example, I have a goal to get a 6-pack by the end of 2019. Never happened. So now it's a 2020 goal. And like, you know, the whole point for me is just to persevere and like try, because like, you know, you have to eat healthy, obviously, and work out. And so I say that because I actually get inspired when I see these really fit women who are eating healthy and they're joyful. Like, yes, some are very posed pictures, but others are very natural pictures, or comments are very real. The post that they're putting is like very much like a real story that happened to them or with their life, right? And just this up and down. And so I don't know, I think it can be negative. I think they can definitely be positive in some way for people like me who look at that. I'm like, yeah, well, I can't do like CrossFit like 4 hours a day to get that. But there are certain things that like, it inspires me to like want to eat healthier in my life, or want to work out simply to feel and look and be more confident, right? For myself, right? A lot of that is like making sure it's about like you becoming like more of the woman you're created to be, I guess. And so I think it can be positive in some ways too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it definitely depends on like for yourself, like where you are mentally, or what you can and cannot look at. So for myself, I know I had to unfollow a lot of people on social media when I was struggling or recovering from an eating disorder. I couldn't see any of that, the exercising, none of it. Where someone in a healthy mindset of now, I can follow those people and I'm fine. It inspires me to do better, and I'm not obsessed with having a body that looks exactly like theirs. But before, I had to block it all out. I could not look at any of it because for some people, like the dieting culture as a whole, I think, most diets I think are not healthy. And for some people, like we all like been on a diet, some people, they just drop off, they can't hold on to it. And other people, I don't know if it's because of genetics, I don't really know the emotional stretch you're under, it turns into a full-blown eating disorder. So it just depends on the person. I don't really know what it is, the preconditions that people have that leads to one or the other, but it really just depends on the individual, I think.
Yeah.
And actually, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, Dan had a really cool comment. And he said, with such sexualized media, it feels like women or men are being conditioned to see beauty in a distorted way. These body types and features need to be a certain way per se. And thus women feel like they have to conform to that. And I thought that was like spot on, with just the pressure that women feel more so than men may.
Yeah, I think with regards to that, like particularly women in relationships, like if pornography is in some shape or form like an element at play there, I definitely think that there's like a very particular type of pressure on those women. And I guess, yeah, just in general too. Instagram. I'm thinking of something else and like, I don't know if I should say it. I have noticed on my Explore feed, I don't know if Instagram still does this, but Instagram used to have like a page years ago that it was like others, like people you follow have liked these photos.
Oh yeah.
And I remember seeing that like guys I was friends with, or like I remember in one instance, it was like my friend's boyfriend were liking photos on Instagram that I was like, holy mackerel. And they think people can't see this stuff. And that kind of stuff, even that, like, I think it's just an example of how like women are watching men all the time and assessing all the time what men find to be attractive and then trying to incorporate it into their lives. And so when you have this situation that there are these women on Instagram, sorry, now this is kind of tangential in response to Dan's comment. When you have these women on Instagram who are like posing a particular way and like quite literally not wearing clothing, like they're wearing lingerie as far as I'm concerned. It makes it very, very hard for the women in their lives who can very clearly observe that like they like that to, I think actually on the one hand, to respect them. I have a really hard time seeing the guys, like it's very hard for me to respect them when they're liking that kind of stuff on social media. On the other hand though, I can imagine that the women they're in relationships with, it puts them in a really difficult situation. And actually Dan asked in the comments too about, sorry, and then actually we can go back to I do want to circle back on what we were talking about before, because Victoria, I know you had something to say and I had something to add too. Dan had asked, do women dress for, I saw it. Hold on. Where is it? Do you guys want to talk about, do women dress more to be noticed by other women or by men, or neither / depends? We kind of touched on that, but I kind of feel like maybe it depends on the situation. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
I would say like most situations, like women want to feel confident, right? And I've had this question my friend's husband asked her, like, why do you guys wear heels? Like those look so uncomfortable, right? Like why are you wearing like 10-inch wedges, like all this stuff? And she was like, that's a good question. She was like, because like when women like are dressed well, when you do that, you feel confident, right? You feel better when you're all like put together and set. So I personally think it's either A, for your own self, or for other women, right? But I can tell you, like, typically I don't get dressed thinking like, oh, I need to look better than that girl that I'm going to see today, right? Like that's not like an active thought, at least in my mind. And I think most women hopefully have a more healthy mindset on this, aren't constantly comparing yourself to what every other girl is wearing. But you do kind of want to like fit in with what the other girls are wearing, and you get to something and everyone's like, oh, you look cute. Oh, you look cute. It's like just back and forth. So I don't know. I think sometimes for men, but what do you guys think?
There is this very weird thing as a woman that I even sense with myself, that on the one hand, you want to be like, I feel like every woman has that part of her that she wants to be like, she wants to stand out in the crowd, like be like, you know, the prettiest or like whatever. But then on the other hand, there's this heightened self-consciousness about standing out.
Yes.
You know, like
Yes.
I don't know what that is. I don't know what's going on
Such
there.
a
But like on the
dichotomy.
one hand, you don't want to be the one, but on the other hand, you totally want to be the one. I don't get that.
And sorry, really quick, I gotta jump in about that.
Yeah.
Brides on their wedding day, do you know how many friends I know that have struggled with that? And when I imagine myself like walking down that aisle and everybody's staring, like all you want to do is look at your husband, right? But like I have been in so many weddings when girls are like, so like I don't want to be the center of attention, but it's also like the best day of my life and my wedding day.
Yeah.
And it's kind of about me and God and like the guy, but really it's about everybody looking at me walking down the aisle. Like it's about me.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is this oxymoron for girls of like, you know, we want to feel pretty and beautiful. And like, I don't know that I really want to be the center of attention, but like you want to be noticed, but you also
Right.
don't want to be like noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is that?
How much of it that has to be like, this is just me being a little jaded probably because I work in the industry, but how much of that has to do with like advertising and like being sold this idea that, or like commercialization of these ideas, like your perfect day, so you have to be in the spotlight, or like you have to be the center of attention, you have to have the perfect this, or you have to have like for prom, like women go all out. I'm like, you guys are literally 16. Calm down. You just got a driver's license. You don't need to have a ball gown. You're not like in a Miss America pageant.
Yep.
Like it's ridiculous how expensive these things are too. And so it's crazy to
Yep.
think that this is our new normal.
Yep.
I completely agree with that. And I think, again, this is, I think, something that could be a whole other episode of its own, but especially with the marketing toward that and weddings, like I talk about this with my parents a lot, like what's being sold now is like weddings are parties. They're not a sacrament anymore. And especially when you're marketing this to, you know, a secular crowd, you know, it's all about you. It's all about the party aspect. It's all about how it's going to look, what people are going to drink, what they're going to see. Like, it's not about the actual union of the two people. Like the marketing could care less about that. And I think that's a huge part of where that stems from. You know, and seeing it in weddings too, you know, I can think of, I don't want to say like successful weddings, you know, versus not, because I've like been to a couple in the past few years, but I think about, you know, the things I remember aren't necessarily like, I don't remember what the table decorations look like. You know, I can think about, you know, friends of mine who've gotten married and like, I just see the way the couple looks at each other. Like, that's the thing that I'm going to remember. You know, that's the thing. It's like their relationship, and that's really beautiful. And I've been to other weddings where that wasn't really the case. And it's, but it's hard because that's what you're sold from the time you're a kid. You've got, I mean, I'm guilty of it. I have a Pinterest board of like maybe some like stuff I'd want someday because it's been sold to you for so long.
Yep. Amen. Let's circle back on, and then, well, we're doing okay on time. There are like a ton of really good questions in the chat.
Yeah.
I really want to get there, but let's circle back on the food, workout, social media thing. Victoria, do you remember what you were going to say?
Oh, yes. I told Jackie the story last week on the phone when we were talking, but I think something, you know, kind of like how, you know, we're watching how men are looking at women and what they're reacting to and how they're talking about women. Women do the same thing. And I think that can be equally damaging. And that's something that women don't talk enough about. And, you know, I look at my own experience and I remember really vividly my senior year of college, you know, I was living with a bunch of girls, we were all friends, and two of them like really got into going to the gym together, which was great. They like did these classes, they had these workouts they were rotating. I was like, good for them. I sleep in instead, you know. we all make our own choices. But, you know, they would come home and we had another roommate who had struggled for many years with an eating disorder. And, you know, these two would come back from the gym and would talk really openly in our home and be like, well, I worked out today, so I'm going to reward myself with like 5 chocolate covered almonds and I'm going to have just 5. And, you know, they're having these loud conversations and it was like, and I've never struggled with anything like that, but it was even like irritating to me. And then my other roommate came to me and was like, do they understand that like this is the exact sort of thing I was doing for years when I was genuinely struggling with like, am I even eating today because I feel so bad about how I look? You know, it was counting out these exact things.
Wow.
And women are so guilty of that. And I don't know if it's, you know, I want to make myself feel better and like, good on me, I exercised. Like, I'm guilty sometimes of like, I work out and then I'm like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have pasta for dinner. That'll like undo everything I just did. But it's also ingrained to like, it's like the humble brag workout culture. And like, you never know who might be hearing you say this. Like, you don't know what people have gone through. Like, you know, body image is something that's very private for a lot of people. And I don't think that women are very cognizant of that a lot of the time.
Totally.
That's so
For sure.
I think that, yeah, what you're getting at, I think it's a couple things. I think like we have to be cognizant of how we're come across to other people or how we might be affecting other people, but also like Marie and Pri, in response to like what you guys were saying about, you know, posting on social media and like being inspired by social media influencers versus not. I think the key is like in ourselves, we have to recognize like how we're receiving that information and like what it's how it's contributing to that self-talk. Like we talked last week about like that negative self-talk, like how is it contributing to that? Like I know for me, I live in a family of people who are very passionate about working out. I am not very passionate about working out. I enjoy it to an extent. And then I'd like to go read a book. That's really how I feel. So like I do have moments that like I'll look at like my sister or my mom who are like both aggressive athletes. And I'll feel kind of like, I could try a little harder. Like I could like maybe like look like them or whatever if I like tried. But then I really try to ask myself, like, why would I be doing that? Would I be doing it because I enjoy working out and I like find value in spending my time that way, which I do. But like the answer I think for me would be no. Like I'd rather spend the time that they spend working out doing something else. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think like we have to know what that balance is for us. And yeah, like Victoria, with what you're saying too, like I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that like this is not something that is a requirement for being human, that we all work out aggressively and like count every calorie and all these things. Like if I want to have Shake Shack, I'm going to have Shake Shack. But if I don't want to do that, like, you know what I mean? Like I think that we have to like be very self-aware in terms of like what voices are we letting in and like how are we receiving that, and like what are my motivators? You know what I mean? Like Marie, like the way you're talking about it, like it's very clear that like that inspires you and you just like enjoy it, and that's great. Like that is such a good thing, and it is good to take care of your body, but also like why am I doing it? You know, like am I doing it because I want to be a certain size or whatever? You know, blah blah blah.
Yeah. No, for sure. And honestly, I played soccer growing up and I ran, and I took a break in college and would just run a little bit. And it wasn't until probably like 2 years ago, when kind of going back to last week, but I was really struggling with some mental illness, and I was realizing that I just was lethargic and lazy, to be honest, and laying on the couch when it was dark outside. So from, you know, tips from a lot of people in my life that were living healthy lifestyle, it was starting to work out, right? And so to your point, like I kind of found that as a healthy way for me to cope with my stress, also to just feel more confident, right, in my body. And it actually took me, I was going to one of like the cheaper gyms that was $20 a month, and you know, I was comparing myself actually to all the other guys and girls that were lifting, and I've like had no idea like technique and all this stuff because I hadn't done it before. And it took me some time now where I'm doing like a specific class. I used to hate classes. And anyways, the point I'm getting at is that it took a while to like find those things, right? And that's where I think you kind of have to be in the healthy mindset, and you go up and down, right? And also with the food thing too, Mary Kate, like, you know, Shake Shack, or we want this thing, like we have to learn, right, between our passions and our kind of logic and how to use both in this whole workout, fitness, eat super healthy culture, because to any extent, any of it can become unhealthy if we don't do it for the right reasons,
Totally.
right?
Yeah. And I think,
go ahead, Pri.
oh, sorry. I was just going to say, you have to put in I think both of you hit the nail on the head. And I think something that I have started asking myself is like, does this, like, not to sound like I'm being hokey or Marie Kondo-y, but does this bring me joy? And like, do I actually like to do this because I'm actually doing this out of the goodness of my heart? Like, or do I feel like this is an obligation that I have to do? And after a certain time, like, you do certain things that just become like chores, and you're not feeling fulfilled, or you're not feeling complete by them. And that's not to say that like working out is wrong. I don't think that working out is wrong. I think you should do everything in moderation and like, do everything to the best of your abilities, and don't be so hard on yourself. If one day you want to eat Shake Shack, like, treat yourself, like, enjoy those little
I
things.
do.
And I don't stop you. Because I'll probably join you. I just need an excuse. But I think, I think we don't need to be so hard on ourselves and like give in to the societal pressures, because ultimately, like, we make up society. So if the narrative has been written for us at this point to be hard on ourselves, we can eventually flip that narrative if we take into power like what we want our narrative to be. Because ultimately, like, we're all going to end up 6 feet under, and like, we all know where that is. So don't.
And my body's going to be perfect in heaven.
That's the hope. Amen.
So I have
I
actually.
can't believe we're on a live stream talking about.
Oh gosh.
Okay. I've been prompted, I know I keep talking, but by the Holy Spirit,
No,
I
it's
really
great.
do, because I've had this thought most of the day and for this chat, and I really feel like what you're saying. So we are temples of the Holy Spirit. Jesus Christ is living and breathing within us. And especially as Catholics, he physically is living and breathing within us, right? And we are the crown of creation. And it's something that I struggle to believe or really go back to. But to your point, and I really struggle, but we have to have grace on ourselves as women, because literally we were made from the like side of man, right? Side of Adam. And I constantly try to remember that like we are gold, we are so precious in the eyes of the Lord. And, with God dwelling inside of us, it's like, that has changed my mindset on like, well, how do I treat my body, and how do I talk to myself as a temple of God? How do I, not only talk to myself, but the words I say out loud about myself, right, to other people, and what I'm looking like, how I'm dressing, like, is that exemplifying that Jesus Christ lives and breathes within me and created me, So it's just something that's like super convicting for me every time I catch myself, like, and I'm just sitting here hearing all of us talk about these struggles, and like just thinking of God like smiling down at us and being like, ladies, you don't even know, like, I have so much joy and peace and freedom for you guys that I need you to like let go of,
Yeah. The female body is so amazing. It is amazing, you guys. So I FaceTimed with my really good friend, Nicole, out in DC this morning, and she just had a baby. I think I mentioned this in Slack. She just had a baby. She went in, I like hadn't heard the full story until we talked today. She thought that her water broke as she was going to bed 2 weeks ago. And she said to her husband, like, I think my water broke, but I'm not sure. So she just like went to bed, and she woke up in the middle of the night and was like going into labor, like her body was getting ready. Like she was having full blown contractions. And they live in DC. Her family is in like Virginia and in Connecticut. So her sister was going to drive out to watch her other 2 kids. So she calls her sister and she's like, okay, I need you to come, whatever. But things were progressing very, very fast, like scary fast. And she said, this is so funny. This goes back to what I was telling you guys before we went live about like just my emotions and thinking people are after me when they're not. And
Oh dear.
she said that I didn't know this, but she said that when a woman's body starts transitioning from like preparing to labor to like, okay, like it's active, it's time to like actively push, you get like the woman's body, she gets like almost angry, like territorial, like, don't come at me, don't touch me, I'm about to birth a child. And so her husband had gone into the room and was like, okay, I'm gonna need you to like get in, like, I need you to get in the car and we're gonna drive with the kids to the hospital because your sister's taking too long and like you're gonna have this baby in our bedroom if we don't leave. And she was like, do not move me, I am not going anywhere. And her sister heard her on the phone and her husband was holding it. I don't think she would care that I was telling the story. I don't know, maybe she's listening. Nicole, if this isn't okay, I'm so sorry. It's actually a great story. So her sister heard her on the phone and she was like saying to her husband, she was like, okay, she needs to push like now. Like I can tell that that's what's happening. So you guys have to call an ambulance. That's what you have to do. So they called 911. These two firefighters get to their house. And the two firefighters are like, neither of us has ever delivered a baby before, so we're gonna need to call for backup. So they called 4 more firefighters. So she's having a baby in her bedroom. Her 2 like toddlers are in the other room, and her husband's like there, and there's 6 firefighters in. And they live in an apartment in DC, so like her kitchen and her bedroom are like connected. And so she was telling me this morning, she was like, Mary Kate, there was this moment of like shame of like, I am literally like in my most vulnerable, and there are 6 men that I don't know outside my door. And I might die doing this because I'm not in a hospital and I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm not prepared for this. And then she said that when it was all over, all of the firemen were like, holy mackerel. Like they were like, that was the wildest thing we've ever experienced. And one of the firemen thanked her. They were like, this is the best thing that's like, this is great. Like, I love that this happened. And it like, that sounds so crazy, but it's like the female body is so amazing. Like our bodies were just made to know what to do when that happens. Like the fact that you can literally birth a child and not really have very much help with that is like a miracle by like, that is like the definition of a miracle. So sorry, that was like a major tangent, but like, I thought that story was so cool of like, her body just like knew what was happening. And so I think Marie, like exactly to your point that when we get so self-critical about like, you know, like X, Y, or Z, all the different things, all the different facets of the female body, and we're like so hyper aware of ourselves and like self-conscious and all these other things, like we are totally losing sight of the way that God made us, which is so amazing and such a miracle. And also like is exhibited even if we're not, you know, birthing a child. Like that's just one example of the ways that like our body is exhibited, like the miracle of our body is exhibited in the world. Like that's just one example. So total tangent. Nicole, if you're listening, I hope it was okay that I just shared that story. But
Nicole, we all thought it was beautiful.
Yeah.
I thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, Derek had an awesome question. Did anyone have any other comments about that before we? No. Okay, Derek had an awesome question in the chat. What role do dads or moms play in a girl's body image? Is it helpful to tell them they're pretty a lot, or does that feed the image beast, so to speak? Does that feed the image beast, so to speak? I have thoughts, but you guys go first.
So I don't know. I'm a little torn on this. So I don't know if I should have said that out loud, but I think, you know, flip the script. I think there's so much that we're being inundated with and we're going to compare ourselves. It just, given the society that we live in, take control of the narrative is what I would say. And I think you at such a, you have this beautiful gift of being a parent. And so take that and be able to, like, God allows us to help form these minds. And so take that as part of helping them grow up and live a good life. And so nurture their minds, mind, body, and spirit. So if that means that you're teaching them to love themselves, I would say that, like, I wish my parents did that more. I think, you know, growing up for me, I can only speak from my experience and my parents because I'm not a mom. Like, I think just the importance of how valuable it is. Like, I didn't grow up in a household where we really talked about our bodies at all. And so that can be a good thing and a bad thing. Like, if you have health conditions that develop over time, like, you wish that they had talked about it and all of that. But on the flip side, like, I was never complimented just strictly on my bodies. It was based off of my merits. If I did something wrong, I knew about it. If I did something right, I knew about it and I was complimented. And I think that that's also, like, if you're complimenting your child for getting straight A's in school, then, you know, compliment them for something beautiful that they do. And if they're really talented in a sport that they play, then you're going to compliment them too. So why not say, like, wow, like, you are God's creation and you are beautiful. And so why not? There's nothing wrong with it.
Amen.
Yeah.
My dad was really good at this. Like, my dad is one of those men who was like made to be a father of daughters. And it's like me and my two younger sisters. So God had a plan. And like, I have like very fond memories growing up of my dad, like telling us stories when we were going to bed at night. Like, we joke about it now, but like a very like endearing story my dad used to tell us is in my old house, we had all these windows in the room that I shared with my sisters. And we had like 3 twin beds that lined up, you know, together.
Oh.
And there were like squirrels that would run up and down like the windowsills on these windows. And my dad used to tell us these stories about the squirrels coming in to like try on our jewelry in the middle of the night. And then they would like put the jewelry back and then they would like watch us play with our jewelry during the day. And it's just like a very sweet, like dad daughter thing, you know, but I like think of that very fondly. And I think my dad was very good at like complimenting us and like telling us that we were worthwhile and that we were beautiful, not just like physically, but like for all the things about us, in like very gentle and just like ways that I remember fondly and that I think I really internalized as a kid. I will say that, and this is kind of an unfortunate thing, but like, I think it's like a Dr. John Gottman thing. For every negative comment, there have to be 5 compliments, and not to like have a count so much as like, I could probably tell you every negative thing about my appearance that my parents have ever said to me. And like, I could probably, like, when I think about those moments, I can go back to that moment. I can go back to that day and that very, like, what I was wearing or what, like, I think parents have a very particular power to like, yeah, I don't know. I remember the negative comments, and when I say negative comments, I mean like comments about my weight or comments about like whether or not I was wearing makeup that day or like criticism type of comments. And so I think that as a parent, you have to be so cognizant of the words coming out of your mouth, not just about your daughter, but also about yourself, because kids listen to everything you say. And so when you're, you know, like when you're a mom and you're like talking constantly about your weight or talking constantly about like this or that, or like talking constantly about like other women you know and their appearance, or like other girls you know and their appearance, like your daughter is listening to that and she's internalizing it, and she is taking that information and applying it to herself when she looks in the mirror. And I think that's so huge. And so like, to be honest, I would almost say that the negative outweighs the positive in that regard, because you could compliment, it's like the supermodel thing. Like you could have every validation in the world, but if it's in your head that there's something about you that needs to be different, nothing anyone says is going to change your mind about that. And girls will have that anyway. The last person they need it from is their parent. That's my thought about that.
That was really beautiful. I think it just plays into our minds. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on this, but psychology in general, like classical conditioning and negative conditioning and whatever, like positive reinforcements that we get from it. Truly negative reinforcements, oddly enough, like it's so fascinating to me, just like from a mental, like our mindset, that like negative things really stick out to me even now. Like when my parents said no, that was the first thing that I would remember. And especially if it was a comment like, you're wearing that, and like they probably meant nothing from it, but that's something that stood out. It's like, is it because I'm fat? Like, am I wearing something that was, you know, those are the questions that I thought of. So I don't know.
There's kind of like two directions I want to go with this. I'm not sure if the second one tracks, but we'll see. But like growing up, I think my parents did a really good job. I never really thought much of it. I just like frolicked around as a kid and whatever. And I remember getting to, this was the summer after I graduated college. And I was like getting ready to like go to work for my internship. And I was trying to put on this like sundress that I'd bought like sophomore year of college, and I couldn't zip it. And I like had a freak out. And it was just like one of those times when you just like need a good cry, and I wigged out and I was like crying to my mom, and I was like, why doesn't this fit? Like, I don't understand. Like, this has always fit. And she handled it so well. And kind of going back to what Mary Kate was talking about with like women's bodies are awesome and there's so much they can do. And she just kind of looked at me basically like, well, of course it doesn't fit the same. Like, you were 19 when you bought that, and now you're 22. And like your body changes a lot between then, especially because you're in the area, like it's a time in your life when your body is like, have kids. And that was something that like the perspective, like not being a mom, that I didn't really have, where I was just freaking out because I'm like, why don't I fit into this thing that I bought when I was like 18, 19 years old, when my mom's reinforcement was less about who cares if it fits. It was more about, yeah, like it's not going to fit because your body change, literally bodies change. And I think that that's something that parents don't talk enough about, kind of circling way back to the beginning of this discussion. And I think a lot about too, like my boyfriend and my best friend are both nurses. And I used to be someone, and I do think growing up, especially if you go to like small private schools and stuff, you're not comfortable talking about the body, because also in media, it's something, it's like a taboo topic. It's like, that's inappropriate. We talk about it later.
So bizarre.
And now having like a lot of people who are like medical professionals in my life, they talk about bodies all the time. They're not grossed out by anything. And that's actually had a really positive like effect on how I've become comfortable talking about these things. Because I used to think like, oh my gosh, if I ever have to have like the modesty talk or the sex talk with my kids, like that's going to be so awkward. How do you go through that? Like, oh my gosh. And now I'm like, well, this is literally like the most natural thing you could talk about.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, it's probably going to be awkward for them. They'll have like some funny story to tell later. But the older I get, the more I realize how important that is, and how I don't think that, you know, the 2-week family life class in school dealt with that the best that it could.
Yeah. Dang, this is, okay. I love this topic. I want to ask this question. If you guys don't want to answer it, you don't have to. How did your parents, did your parents have the sex talk with you? Or did they not? Did they not? I'll just say, Marie's like, sorry, Marie.
Don't be sorry. You're good.
Is it good? Is it okay?
Yeah, I can share. Just funny. Like, I remember being in the car and like asking my mom the question, like, what happened? Like,
you brave
physically,
girl.
what happened?
Whoa.
Because I was so naive. And I think they had just talked about it at school, and I was like, what? I don't know what that is. So I literally asked my mom, and I was like, wait, I don't get it. And yeah, so I'll spare you all the details, but I asked her and got a point blank answer. And like,
Wow.
I don't know if you ever tried to explain that literally anatomy to like a young child, but I remember it very vividly.
Yeah. Nice.
Mary Kate, when you asked that question, all I could think of is like the Mean Girls episode, or like the scene in Mean Girls where they're like, if you have sex,
Sex and get pregnant,
you die.
Yeah.
Basically, that was Sex Ed 101 for me. From my parents.
Did you guys have the American Girl body book?
Yes.
Did you? That's amazing.
Yes.
Wait, Pri, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
No, that's literally what I was going to say. I was just like, oh my gosh, that was my childhood where they didn't really talk about it. And I went to public school all my life except for college. And so they definitely do touch upon it. And I feel like depending on where you go to school, if you don't go to a private Catholic school or what have you, when you're growing up, you are going to be exposed to that, even if it's just like on the back of the school bus where there's like a bunch of fifth graders and you're like a little third grader and you think it's cool sitting in the back of the bus with all the fifth graders and like, and just talking about like just basic stuff, like, what periods are for women, and like you're gonna experience changes now, like guys are gonna also experience changes, and like this is what this means. Like these are natural things that are happening to your bodies, and you would think that your parents are gonna want to talk about them, but apparently they don't. And I don't understand why. But also I get it.
Yeah, but like, do you want to have the sex talk with your kid? Like,
No,
I don't know that I want
probably-
to do that with my kids.
Praise
Make
God.
my husband do it.
Oh gosh.
Praise God for YouTube, because I'm pretty sure I'll find some like dry professor from like who's 80 years old, who's gonna have like some whiteboard, and I'll just play that and be like, come back to me when you have questions. And if it's a guy, if it's my son, I'll be like, go talk to your dad. I don't want to deal with this. Goodbye.
Oh, you guys, that is so funny.
I will say though, like
Mary Kate, I can't believe you
addressing,
asked
I just saw.
Go, Victoria. Sorry.
No. I just saw Dan's comment about like, why do we give the sex talk as if it's this awful thing? And I think there is something to be said about like, especially if you're a Catholic parent and you like don't want your kids having sex before marriage. It's like, if we don't talk about it, it won't happen. So like, we're not going to give them the details. We're not going to give them the information because they'll figure it out in like 20 some years. And I think that that's where the disconnect occurs.
Yep. You guys, wait, go ahead. Finish.
No, it's just like, don't tell them too much, like just enough.
I
Yeah.
was just gonna say, do you think that that's one of the reasons why people, like, there was a huge spike in teen pregnancy, because they don't know what's happening, or they're like figuring stuff out? I don't know. Obviously, this is me being uneducated and asking questions, but
I don't know. To be honest, I guess it was probably a combination of things. I think that when birth control came around in the 60s and 70s, I think that the culture just changed in general. I think that in the 70s, like 70s and 80s, like that era that a lot of our parents were at, like teenager and college years, like high school, college years, I think they were making decisions, they were making choices that now as adults, they're like, I can't tell my kid not to have sex because I was having sex at that age, or like, you know, like they just feel like they can't be hypocritical about that. Yeah, I don't know. But you guys, there's a reason that I asked this question, because I think everyone probably thinks I'm an absolute psycho for asking. This is one of my, like, I think my mom did this exactly the right way. And I literally, when I go to events for work, and somehow this comes up often when I'm like speaking in front of groups, and I tell people, like, if you're a parent of a child, you need to look them in the face and you need to say to them, sex is only for your husband. You only have sex with that one person, because you know what? It worked for me. And that's what my mom did. My mom literally sat me down and was like, this is the situation. This is what the world will tell you. And this is what I'm telling you. And I'm your mom. And you will never have sex with anyone other than your husband. And I was like, well, I'm convinced. And like, I think about that moment all the time. I think about it with like church stuff. I think about it with like pro-life stuff. And I feel like that was the moment. Like my mom kind of made me the person I am in that moment, because it was this thing of like, okay, I've just presented you with the truth, and I've just told you, like, this is what it is. And like, I don't know, that's my comment about that. So I don't know what other people's parents did. I gotta say, like, I am fully bragging on my mom. She did this the right way. And if there are like parents like Derek, listen to me. You have to look your kids in the face and tell them that that is the expectation, because they will listen to you if they respect you. So that's why I asked that question, because I wanted to know if other parents did that. I don't know where my mom came up with that idea, but
that's awesome.
It worked, man. It freaking worked. Yeah. It's pretty amazing. That's my comment about that. Yeah, Kevin, I think it's birth control too. Do you guys have any, is there anything we didn't cover? Do you guys want to go to the chat or go to the comments?
Yeah. I have one more comment to make it on that.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, it's funny, all our experiences were like, literally don't do this, or this is how it's done. Like, versus like, imagine if we could be the parents, or if our parents were like, this is the most beautiful thing you might do in your life. Like starting it that way, that God has designed for you.
Yep.
With your husband to have kids.
Yep.
And bond you to your husband.
Yep.
You know, like if that is the way that it was phrased, because for so long in my life too, it was like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do that in the Christian life. It's not how God wants us to see it, right? It's do this
100%.
in this context, or believe this in this context, like whatever the topic is, right? So just like thinking of, funny how we all got this, don't do this, or this is what you're only going to do at one point, but the why behind it, right? I think that's so important.
Yep. 100%. Yes, I totally agree. Sorry, now I'm getting pulled into the chat. Are there any questions you guys
so
see?
There's one comment in the chat, I think Megan said it, that I definitely agree with, back to like the complimenting, you know, not just complimenting about like your body, but other positive things about your daughter or your son, right? Because I think you need to help here I am talking about parenting, and I'm not a parent. So what was helpful for me is that when my parents would build me up with words, with other things that like they valued about me, right? Like I would get the occasion like, oh, you look nice. And it was like, thank you, right? But like, oh, you did a great job, or, you know, you are being kind. Like these are very simple examples, but just like encouraging them in so many other ways to help your child, at least to help me, like realize like my worth, right? Instead of always telling me my worth, which I think is important for kids. You need to tell them their worth because they don't know it. At least I didn't know it, right, for so long. And then once I got to like a certain age, it was like them just continually helping me realize my own worth.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And Dan and I have talked about this before, that I think like women, Dan and I had a conversation one time about how like women, yes, it's true that mother-daughter relationship is very important, but I think that the father has a very, the father really, like, I think has a strong voice in helping a girl like see her worth as well. Like, I think that, you know, when we talk about, like, when we hear things about girls who have like daddy issues and stuff, that's just like such an awful, denigrating phrase. But with those things, there's a little bit of truth in that I think like girls who have not had, a strong male in their lives telling them like, you're worthwhile and I see value in you that exists purely because of who you are and not because of what you have to offer me, whether it's sexually or otherwise. I think that women, if they don't have that strong voice, then they somewhere down the line may or may not have an experience that gives them the impression that their worth is tied to their utility, like particularly their sexual utility. And I think that a lot of women have had experiences that have made them feel like, I am only worthwhile if I am like open for business with men, essentially. Or maybe they're not even thinking it quite that way. Like maybe it's just this, like, I think women are constantly seeking that validation from men. And you can pursue like that desire for validation can be healthy if we understand it and recognize it and are able to like point it toward the divine. But if it's not well received and executed, I think that's when you see women like engaging in like promiscuous behaviors or like, otherwise like serial dating with men or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
I think so. I think the way I interpreted that, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it starts with confidence and how parents have such a fundamental role in building confidence for guys and girls, like boys or girls, like from the get-go. Parents have such a huge role in forming these young minds and these impressionable minds. So you want to fill them up as much as possible with the confidence. So if it's a girl, then you want your dad complimenting you on your achievements and whatever other aspects of it, or just like raising you up and like being uplifting in your life. And in a fold, guys seeking that out with their mothers as well. And I think that there's something to be said about that, because you won't then feel incomplete or I think the word that I'm looking for is like being more fulfilled. You'll feel fulfilled in what you currently have. So your family life, where your parents are like, like, hey, that's not true. When a bully's like yelling at me, you might give into it just because like you're 2 6-year-olds and you're fighting on the playground. But you'll know at the end of the day that you're coming from a loving home and that you're going to be complete in that family dynamic. So there is a way to combat some of the works or the insecurities that the devil is trying to
totally
into you. And so that being said, I think there is something to be said about, at a certain point, like parents do stop doing that. When they're young, parents want to compliment and like get their phones out and like take literally every milestone they want to capture. But then at a certain point, it does stop. And so what can parents do? I truly don't have the answer to this, but what can parents do to continue that positivity and that confidence going for guys and girls from such a young age to the point where they're graduated and like young adults like us, and keep that positivity and nurture that positivity. So then hopefully their kids can not have body image issues or whatever other issues that they may be experiencing.
Yeah, echoing kind of what you guys both said, I think it's so important for fathers to be vocally telling their daughters how beautiful and worthy they are, which is something that I didn't really grow up with, even though my dad's was a great dad, but he's not very vocal. And I think that did affect me, like later to seek affirmation from guys, because I didn't feel like I got that from like the main male figure in my life. And I think because also like the way that we see our fathers echoes back to God the Father. So if we are getting that from our male father on earth, that we're beautiful and we're worthy, we're going to more easily associate that with God the Father. So any of the boys in the chat that are going to be dads one day, make sure you're telling your daughters how beautiful they are. Of course, compliment them on other things, but like they need to hear the words, you are beautiful, you are worthy, you are good, even though like some men in your life might treat you like crap. It's like we need to hear that from our dads.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think Kevin had a good question. Have we ever had a priest hurt or help your body image?
Interesting.
Good question.
So I've actually never had a negative experience in that. I think my relationship with priest has been very much focused on my body and my soul, and more directed at like my soul. So whether that's in confession or that conversation I mentioned on the last podcast for like an hour with a priest, like, I mean, that sounds so intense, my soul, but really just like conversationalist, like conversations and really understanding like what I'm struggling with at like a core, and not about my physical appearance or my body related to that. So I personally have had a kind of a positive experience that where I haven't heard any negative words about my body from a priest.
Yeah. I don't know that I ever had an experience that a priest affected my body image. I remember one time in confession, I was confessing, and there was a screen, and because of one of my sins that I confessed, the priest asked me if I was overweight, and which is such a weird thing. Yeah, such a weird thing for a priest to ask someone in the confessional. And I remember feeling like, what a weird, out of place question for you to ask me, like for a million reasons. Like it wasn't really pertinent to the sin. I felt it was just very weird. And I do think that like maybe something good for priests to know or understand, and this is a big one for me, is like, I think it's important, like, I think it's very easy for us to be critical of people who struggle with weight in whatever direction, and to make it about the weight. So, you know, like we'll tell people like who are overweight, like you need to eat less or you need to exercise more. But oftentimes it's an underlying issue that's either physical or spiritual, or mental. So, you know, a lot of weight is related to mental health. A lot of weight, especially in women, is related to spiritual health. Like food addiction is a real thing. And people in general, but I think especially women, use food as a coping mechanism. And if you're suffering in other areas, food, like a weight issue can sometimes be, you know, consistent with like a spiritual or a mental health issue. Also, there are just like physical issues that people really struggle with. Like a lot of my issues are related to my thyroid issue. You know, like I know people who have struggled with other like health issues that have affected their weight. Again, in both ends, like you have women. That's the thing that I think people need to recognize, is like there are just as many women who are self-conscious about being too skinny as there are women who are self-conscious about being too fat. And so I think that as a priest, the greatest disservice that you could ever do to someone is assume that the physical outward appearance is a reflection of a lack of self-discipline, and that there isn't anything else that could possibly be going on. I would assume the latter. I would assume that there's either something spiritual, physical with regards to health, or like mental going on, and that it's not just like pure lack of self-discipline. I think that making that assumption would be mostly offensive to anyone who hears it. So yeah, that's my thought about that. What else?
I think just one general thing that I wanted to say is like, it's important to understand that women go through these issues, but what I found refreshing just having a conversation with a few guys, I think it was like last week or a couple of weeks ago. I don't remember at this point. Quarantine is getting to me, you guys. But it was really insightful to understand what these guys had to say about insecurities, and just like I was going on and on harping about like female insecurities and how much like we go through it. And obviously me being a woman myself, like I can speak to myself, but it was insightful to understand, like one of the guys said, you know, growing up, he was bigger. And so he now is like really into fitness. And so he took, to me, that says like, wow, you took fitness into your own hands and you use that as a tool to get to what you wanted and whatever your journey is, like in a healthy way. And on the flip side, like there are so many stereotypes for girls and guys. This guy pointed out that there are so many stereotypes that like guys have, or they experience too. And I'd be curious to see in the live chat if anyone has to say what some of those are, just to better educate myself, to be quite honest. But there are tall, like guys who are tall and lean, they are considered like weak and like not so muscular or like buff. But so I think it's just so fascinating to me that like women are internally just like dealing with these issues, and men are too on the flip side, yet somehow in a disconnected way, we're still functioning as a society and still giving into these like body dysmorphic pressures that both sides have, when it's quite frankly not true. Like just because you are a little bit bigger doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong with you, or like you have some like health issue. It just truly could just be that God made you that way, and that is who you are. Like you're bigger built versus like someone being super skinny. Like great, that's how you are. Like you know, so I think it's fascinating to me, and it put into perspective, like, wow, like I am pretty lucky that I thankfully didn't have to experience such a hard awakening, or go through such a hard experience that as some other men or women have gone through. But wow, it's really eye-opening, and I think it's important. It should open a conversation for us and what we tolerate as a society for what we see on social media or in just mass media in general.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, you know, it's like a really, like a balance has to be struck, because we also live in a society that says that like it's okay to be unhealthy, you know, that like it's okay to just consume at excess, and that it's okay to not take care of your body, and it's okay to, you know, be a size that will inevitably bring other health issues for you. And it's a really sensitive thing, because everything I said before, I believe that like weight is so much an indicator of so many other things going on with the human person, and we have to look at the whole person. But we also have to be like constantly pursuing healing for the human person. And all of us are broken, all of us are wounded, and you know, like some of us might not be overweight, but we might have a slew of other issues that you just can't see on the outside, or you know, vice versa. Some of us aren't super skinny, but like there are other things going on. I mean, this is just one example of the many issues that the human person struggles with, and it's so sensitive in our culture, and has really been sold to us as something that we have to just be okay with. And it is a fact that everyone is worthy of love, and that everyone has worth as a human being and is worthwhile. And none of the external indicators are mean anything with regards to the worth of the human person, and that is vehemently the case. But also, we want healing for people, and we want a healthy mind, body, and soul for people, and we have to be like brave enough to pursue that for everyone, and encourage others to pursue that, because it's what we deserve as human beings. Well, yeah, because that's what God wants for us. You know, we are a temple of the Holy Spirit. God wants health for our mind, body, and soul. And so I think as human beings, we have to be willing to engage in that as well. And that's a hard thing. It's a really hard thing to have this conversation. And guys, kudos. I feel we've done it very well today. But like it's a really, really hard conversation for all of the above reasons.
Yeah. If there's no more questions in the chat, I have a question for everyone. Is there like one woman in your life who like really exemplifies a positive body image or like self-confidence? So either a woman that you know, or even like a public figure that you follow that really basically does it right, has it right, knows her worth.
Marie, I think you've brought her up too. I think I love Leah Darrow on social media. I mean, she used to be, I know, she's amazing. She used to be a model, which I also was like part of my past in like the modeling industry, whatever. That's a whole other story. But she's such an example, because now she's on social media showing pictures of like her post-pregnancy body, totally unfiltered, and is like, whatever, like I don't care. Like this used to be a part of my life that consumed me, like physical beauty, a part of my story. And now I'm fine. She finds her worth, you know, in other things, that doing what God wants her to do in her life. And she's so unfiltered on Instagram in a good way about the realities of like what a woman's body looks like after she gives birth. It's not this totally filtered and photoshopped image, which is what we normally see in society. So women that are showing their real healthy bodies in different phases of a woman's life, because our bodies are constantly changing, which we just talked about, which is something that is not represented in the media, that your body goes through phases even throughout the day. As you're eating, your body's going to look different. Which I feel like is something that I was so bamboozled in high school. I got to tell you that no one told me this, and it's totally normal for like, sorry, I'm going off, for your body to look different throughout the day, because I thought something was wrong with me, and it led to so many serious issues. And it's like, okay, no, it's actually totally normal.
That's so funny.
Anyway, yeah. Someone said Mary in the chat. Okay, obviously Mother Mary. Yeah.
Mary.
He was a big part of my healing from like my like
Mary.
serious issues with eating. Yes, Dan,
And
obviously Mary. He's the example for
And
everything
no,
ever
not
in
just
life.
Mary. He said dot.
dot.
Yes, Mary.
Amen, Jackie. I
I love that.
retweet. There was something I wanted to circle back on in the chat. Dan, when a guy offers a remark about a woman's appearance, what is the difference between a compliment and a creepy, awkward, etc. remark? Okay.
Oh,
Oh man, this is one of my
I don't know why it's
soapboxes.
because I'm laughing. It's like awkward.
yeah. It's a great question because it happens, but it's kind of hard to figure it out sometimes.
Well, that's kind of the thing though, is I feel like women are the worst about this sometimes. Like sometimes I don't know. You guys, hey, I know you'll tell me in the chat if I like, am too siding with the guys on stuff, but I like really can't help but be frustrated when women automatically jump to calling a guy creepy with stuff. It is, generally speaking, I think it is really kind of men to compliment women. At least the men in our community, I think, are really good at that and doing it in an appropriate way. Every once in a while, yeah, you'll get something that's like a little inappropriate or like something that didn't necessarily need to be said out loud. But I think that I think that men are called to be self-aware of like what it is they're complimenting. And I think women are called to receive those compliments gracefully. And yeah, like women, I would say like maybe don't call guys creepy 90% of the time. If a guy is actually being creepy, like you actually feel threatened, there's a way to address that isn't like gossiping with your friends calling a guy creepy. And I think if you feel threatened by someone, that you would obviously not, your first instinct would not be to go to your friends and call a guy creepy. If there's a guy who has in some shape or form either complimented you or expressed interest in you and you're not interested, or you like it's not like a welcome expression of, I don't know. Well, never mind. I should stop. It's hard to receive compliments. I get that. I don't know.
I agree. I mean, not to put it back on the woman, but are there some underlying insecurities that you don't believe about yourself? Those are some of the questions that you should ask. Truly, sometimes, take the sexuality out of it or like just their genders out of it. And like, if a woman was saying that to you, would you find that derogatory or like creepy or whatever? Take it at face value. If someone is complimenting you, just receive it. And obviously if there's something additional that is creepy, to Mary Kate's point, like I would say that like they have to do a few things that definitely get to be creepy. So just be self-aware. Like if we're asking guys to be self-aware, like I think, there's a balance. Like women also have to be self-aware and appreciate that someone is complimenting beauty when they see beauty.
Yep.
I don't know if that was like speaking on your behalf, but yeah.
I totally agree. I think there's a lot more concern with like unwanted touching. Words are a lot less, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will not hurt me.
I don't know why I thought of Disney Channel for
Disney Channel.
Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Mom, for the nursery rhyme before bed.
So pure.
I agree with you guys, but there are some like
Seriously.
Again, this is not supposed to be like a advice giving session either, but there are some type of compliments that touch on certain parts of a woman's body that you should not tell her, especially if you are not seriously dating her and you know her very well. I will leave it there, but most things that guys say to girls they either just don't know how to handle or believe about themselves, so they come off on a certain way, which I agree with you guys, have to learn to accept it. But there are some things that just don't say about certain parts of her body.
I think the key here is like, are you complimenting her or are you making a verbal observation of something? Like, there's a big difference. There's a big difference between saying like, you look really nice, or you look really pretty or beautiful, whatever, or like your shirt is really tight. You know what I mean? Like, which guys say those things sometimes, and then you're kind of like,
Yikes.
thank you. Thank you. Is that
Yeah.
I don't know. You know what I mean?
If you
Am
just
I being
validated
unfair?
in the
I
back
don't
of
know.
my mind, I shouldn't have wore that tight shirt. I should have just wore my
If
sweatshirt.
I
that
have
I
Yeah,
to
really
go,
that's
wanted
where
to
you
wear.
leave the party and go change, honestly.
Yes.
100%.
Mary Kate's like, if I have to nod my head to one side and say thank you, then no.
If you say something to me and I look at you like this, and that's no, I'm just kidding. Just say thank you. Ladies, just say thank you. Even if you're not sure whether or not it was a compliment, just pretend that it was and say thank you. That's a good, I'm glad that distinction worked. That's a good distinction.
Too good.
Derek, I figured some girls were trying to humble brag about a guy, trying to chat them up by 100%.
Yes.
I really believe that women calling guys creepy sometimes is like a way to just brag about a guy paying attention to you. That is my personal, I hate that word. That is not a good word. I don't like that word. Sorry. Hate is a very strong word. I don't like that word.
I think to your point, Mary Kate, I have two thoughts on it, and sorry, I keep interjecting.
Nope, that's
on your
perfect.
thoughts
I have nothing else to say about it.
I feel like, it's the boy who cried wolf story. Like, if someone is actually being creepy, you certainly, I'm not saying that like all situations, like I'm not making a blanket statement or a gross overstatement, I hope. That's not my intent. But I think like at a certain point when you cry that this is creepy, or you just like want attention and you're seeking out attention, and you're saying that someone's compliment is coming off as creepy, that's like, that's at a certain point when, God forbid, but like if something actually creepy were to happen, it could be a little bit, I'm not certainly condoning it by any means, but it could be something that could have an adverse impact on your word. And so use your words very carefully. I think we learned that very early on. And so definitely be cognizant of that. And also on the other end, like being the severe empath that I am, just looking at it from the flip side, like we had our conversation on dating a couple of weeks ago, and we were trying to be like encouraging to men asking girls out and whatnot. And if someone is complimenting you genuinely, if a guy feels confident enough to ask you out or say something complimentary, just as we've already said, like receive it and receive it graciously. There's no harm in it, because it can be demoralizing for them too, and they might feel a certain way about themselves if you say that they're creepy when their intent wasn't that.
Totally. Well, guys, I think we're like almost right at 10 o'clock, 11. Oh
gosh.
Perfect. It's my bedtime.
Hold on. This might be worth waiting 1 second. Someone, please hold. Wait, sorry. He's gonna text me and be like, never mind. Because now I'm holding up the whole thing.
Press the emergency step to give yourself more time.
Press the emergency step.
I'll just tell you guys that, oh, sorry. My dad came down here earlier just to tell everybody. I'm sorry, I got a little distracted because I didn't quite know what to do. He was talking to me.
How long was he down here? Was he down there?
Like on the stairs, and I like gave him the look. Like he didn't know I was on video, and I tried to just play it cool, man.
You said that
And I
literally
texted
like
him.
2 minutes before I asked did your parents have the sex talk conversation with you?
Do you have headphones in, or
I
are
know.
you?
Yeah, I have headphones in.
Oh,
Okay.
I was gonna
you
say,
know.
imagine if he had heard that. It's like, let me give you a first-hand
Sorry, Dad,
account.
you're probably going to listen to this someday on YouTube.
Okay, actually, this is a really good
Tell me.
question, and then we'll close it out after this one. So, what are your thoughts about yoga pants / leggings without your butt covered? I'll be honest, I'm guilty of this. And it's one of those things that like I don't think I would ever just wear leggings in front of like my guy friends. But like going to the store and stuff, I totally like will just wear leggings. But also I have had that thought of like, this is maybe wrong. What do you guys think?
I don't know. I wear like workout pants, which I guess kind of look like
Like
or,
yoga pants, or,
pants
like,
to the
yeah.
gym, and I don't
If
know,
you're
to go
fitting
out.
in the butt area, then that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really think about it. Maybe that's not great. It's just kind of what I wear. I don't know. Yeah. I guess because I just haven't really noticed that it's been a problem, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just not paying attention.
I would be curious to know what the guys in the chat think about this.
I would also
Yeah.
argue that
Yeah,
at
can I
least from
say
my
the
own.
same with you? Go ahead.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
no, I was gonna say just from like my own personal experience, I would say that like a lot of my jeans are probably just as tight as leggings, and like it just they're pants. I don't know. I go throughout my day like I've never really thought much of
Yeah.
it, but I also like danced for many years, and like that's what you wear to class, and
Yeah.
I just don't really think much of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious to see
I
what the guys
used
have
to
to
think about it, honestly. But I'm kind of like you, Mary Kate, where I think it used to be like something I would kind of think, should I do or should I not? And now, honestly, because it's so cold in Chicago and I'm trying to work out most days, it's just naturally what I wear almost
Yeah.
every day, especially working from home and working out. So if I happen to go to the grocery store that day, I typically don't change. It's not something that's like an active thought in my mind. At the same time, I don't think I'm actively trying to find shirts that don't, cover my butt at the same time, right?
Yep.
I'd agree with you guys.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know. This is kind of one of those interesting ones because I do feel like when leggings and yoga pants first became a thing, everybody used to talk about how immodest they were. And it makes me think of like other things that young girls are brought up on. Like I was a cheerleader in high school, and it makes me think about like, the outfits that we had to wear for cheerleading. And now I do look back on that and I'm like, holy mackerel, I would never now. And like, is it really different because I was 16? No, it's not really different. It's arguably probably worse, actually. Maybe not worse. I don't know. I think for women, yeah, this is a tough one because I think women like don't see the problem. Dan says, hate them. I think they're super immodest. I think it's an example of showing as much as possible without actual skin, but perhaps this is a topic for another podcast. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't really have an argument against that. It's really hard. It's really hard. I think the key here is it is very, very hard nowadays. I actually meant to say this earlier to something else we were talking about, and then I kind of forgot. But I was talking about this with a friend recently that like years and years and years ago, when people like were making their own clothes and were like getting clothes from like tailors and stuff, clothes were made to fit women's bodies, like each unique individual body. But now we buy our clothes in a store and it's a size that may or may not be, and this isn't totally with the leggings issue, but now clothes are a particular size that may or may not be the right size. And I think that that's where we get a lot of the issues with women being modest, because it's actually really hard to find clothes that are modest all the time. Like for women, it's actually really, really hard. Like I constantly struggle to find clothes that I feel like are 100% modest all of the time. Especially when it comes to workout clothes. What you guys like, what other options are there than like super form-fitting clothes for working out?
Yeah.
So I don't disagree with it.
I think especially in the winter, to be honest, like
yeah.
I've tried to work out in like joggers and like it is so uncomfortable, and you're like, you know, having to pull up every time you're trying to do a push-up or like whatever, right? So I think especially when it's colder, but I definitely see both sides of this.
Yeah.
My good friend, actually, Jackie, you know Cecilia. She's a good. She's a good. Sorry, she's a good Instagram follow. If anybody is on Instagram, you should follow Cecilia. She's really big on the modesty thing. Like she is like, her whole thing is like modest, but make it fashion. Like she is like kind of hates the whole like you have to wear a skirt if you're a woman thing. But her thing is like she never wears no low necklines. She doesn't wear sleeveless. And she doesn't like, she always makes a point. She wears leggings to work out, but she makes a point of like either tying something around her waist or wearing like a long shirt that covers her butt. And I do think that there's potential to like make an effort in that direction.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is a really good example of like maybe women should probably try harder than we do. I don't like, I fully admit it.
I'm torn on that personally, just because the accessibility, like, this is just me gonna butcher. I'm gonna butcher basic economy, so please stop me. But just thinking about the access to goods and, you know, the supply and demand, we had an excess of cheap labor and cheap goods available to us. And so thinking about that, they created flimsy like materials for us and then marketed it to create this inherent demand for us wanting this comfort and whatever, like leggings and stuff. So that being said, like that we were kind of given that. And also thinking about like form-fitting jeans and stuff. Like I think Victoria brought up a really good point. You think about some of these like accessible brands that we talk about. Their sizing is not exactly the most universal or form-fitting, and like so many sizes vary. And I mean, I'm gonna butcher it, so I'll let Victoria speak to that. But I just speaking from like reality standpoint, like if you want to get something tailored at this point, because the demand is so low, it's become a little bit more scarce, and so it's going to be a little bit more costly, and because of that, it's not as accessible. And that understanding is like, it makes it harder for women, but again, women do have to do better. I'm guilty of it 100%. I might take that tip on like, I might take that tip on like tying a waist or something when I'm working out, but I've also been uncomfortable. Like I go to a gym where like it's very, when we're not in quarantine, like I go to a gym that's very accessible to anyone and everyone. And I don't know people and I'm not super cognizant because I'm just trying to finish a workout, but like, just imagine the eyeballs that are on you. Like, do you want perfect strangers staring at you for something that you're wearing? Like, probably not. So just being a little bit more self-aware. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my takeaway today.
Yeah, but arguably jeans are thicker than leggings, right? And yoga pants. So personally, I don't think we can necessarily compare, even if they're just as tight.
Right.
I don't know. I think I agree. I mean, I'm guilty of the problem, but I think some of this we can try to justify because, like, what did our moms wear to work out? Like, I don't know. When they were growing up, when they were in their 20s, like, so I think part of it is it's fashionable or trendy or just a thing that everybody wears.
Yeah. This is a tough one. I don't know. Dang, people need to make better clothes for women, honestly.
Yeah.
Women's clothes just like, I have this issue constantly. So I love Madewell. I shop at Madewell all the time. Every single dress I've ever purchased at Madewell has been too low cut when I've gotten it home. It's like, who can wear this? Honestly, I hate that. Sorry, that's just my side. I just hate that. I just hate that.
Excuse me, Marie. Juan says modesty is attractive. Thanks, Juan. Comment of the night per Dan.
Hey, yeah. That is comment of the night. Juan with the comment of the night. Wait,
Perfect. I have a
did you say that
sweatshirt
before you
on.
said it, or-
You win, Marie.
I'm kidding.
Wait,
I think we're at Kate night.
Wait, what?
What? Go ahead. I think we have the same shirt on.
Wait, who?
You and I, but you just can't see mine.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Where's your shirt? Where's it from? I'm afraid to remember where my shirt's from, actually. Let's talk about it.
Mine's from Amazon. Never mind.
Oh,
What were you
okay,
going to say?
nice.
You were going to be something about the chat. Somebody had something in the chat.
oh, I was gonna tell you where my shirt's from, but I'm not going to now. It's not from Amazon. I wish it was from Amazon. No, I was just gonna comment that John said he already gave comment of the night to Kevin.
what was his
I don't know
comment?
who told John that it's his, that he gets to give out the comment of the night.
Right.
Oh, well, Kevin did say something about religious habits.
Good
Yo,
point.
religious habits. Wait, sorry, what was, one of you just made a comment.
No, I was just confused. I was like, what was the comment? But that was it.
Oh, that was, I think it was that. I think most guys also don't realize that it's hard for you ladies to find modest clothing. Never knew that. That is 100% true. It is very hard. It's very, very hard to find consistently modest clothes and for them to not be overpriced, decent quality, and not like literally a canvas bag when you put it over your body. Fashion,
Or
fashion
like
is the worst.
Is that going to be a side gig?
also like think about
What?
it. Think about it. When you guys go try things on, like, you know, you try on, which I don't shop that much, clearly not in quarantine, but you'll maybe try on 10 things. You'll probably buy 1 to 2 things.
Maybe.
Because of all of those factors, like it's too low cut or it's riding up, like dresses for weddings. It's nearly impossible to find them that you can dance in and that don't ride up everywhere or are too low cut. Like
I waist jeans up to my
truly,
bra, like things like that. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I just don't like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But like
I totally
it's so
agree.
ingrained in us. It really is. It's like you don't even think about it. It's just the constant thought when you're picking out clothes.
What is your take, you guys, on swimsuits? What do you guys do for swimsuits? Oh, I know.
Hi.
So
I really only wear one
Go ahead.
pieces anymore. I used to not really think about it and wear 2 pieces or bikinis. I know, guys, I know, horrible. In the comments, I really do only wear 1 pieces now. I have really made changes in that area.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah. If any ladies are looking for a great one-piece swimsuit company, they're kind of pricey, but they're worth it. Wait, I gotta find it. Wow, now I can't. Starts with an A. Dang it, you guys. Hold on. Please hold. I'm gonna find it. And then we should probably cut it off. Anyone else have any comments about swimsuits? Also really hard. Also really, really, really hard to find swimsuits that are.
yeah. I was convicted years ago and started wearing basically one pieces, and I kind of bounced back and forth, honestly.
Yeah.
It's a vanity thing, to be honest.
I
It's
get that.
hard to like be bold and not do what everyone else is doing, but I also think women that always wear bikinis, like I hope that guys and or other girls are not judging them because of it and as a reflection of like their faith or something, because it's a really, really hard, I don't think it's a topic. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like a hard conviction to really understand like the worth of your body and to be that bold. It seems probably small, but it's difficult for a lot of girls to do that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
The swimsuit company is, I think you say it, Albion Fit. Have you guys heard of this? Wait, I'm gonna put it in the chat. I got an awesome one-piece swimsuit from here, and like, granted, they're expensive, but I think they're like actually like a good material that like, Kevin, why?
Have you guys heard of Courtney Jean? I have one from there too. That's awesome.
Courtney Dean.
Courtney Jean, Jeane.
Oh, I think, yep. Is it Courtney Kort?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, yep. I've heard of them. Nice.
I'm like taking.
I got a
notes.
really cute one from her. It's like a pink top, and it's
Nice.
2 pieces, but it's kind of like a high-waisted bottom, so everything's like covered. But again, I think it's still hard even with one pieces, like to find a non-low cut one or one that rides up. Like,
Yep.
I think the bathing suit thing is hard all around.
Yep.
So I grew up in
Right.
a pretty conservative household, so I actually grew up not wearing swimsuits at all. Like my mom was like,
Really?
"That's not something that we wear," or whatever. And I think
Mhm.
that has to probably do with my parents being Indian and just a
Mhm.
cultural thing. I don't know, but yeah, I think it's so interesting that there are modest options out there, and yeah, possibly go into it.
Yeah. Okay. Dan wants us to do an episode on modesty. I think we all agree that that's a good idea. How many babies do I have to win comment of the night?
That might be a comment.
That's hilarious. All right, we should probably call it. Guys, this was awesome. This was so great. Any like final thoughts before we close it out? Cool. Thanks, guys. Well, everybody get a good night's sleep. Hey, housekeeping items. We are changing the name of the podcast. I think we've decided on a name. Are we all in agreement?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, Victoria, what is it? You can explain it. It was your idea.
Yeah, I was trying to think of things that might be good from like a marketing perspective, not in like a commercial sense, but because I work in communications. And I was just, I don't know, I was like thinking of different prayers and like how Blessed is She uses theirs and Abiding Together uses theirs. So like the Guardian Angel prayer is one of my favorites. So I think that we're going to go with Entrust Me Here. So kind of the idea of like giving the responsibility of what we're talking about and the protection of that under God. And then, you know, that nice colon and then setting off the topic of the episode.
Yeah.
So
I love it. So we're changing the name. It's going to be Entrust Me Here. And we're going to keep doing these, right, guys? So we do not yet have, we technically are on Apple iTunes, but we're going to be changing the name. So I wouldn't bother with that yet. But we'll get like some social media accounts set up like TCI so that we can get the ball rolling. But yeah, cool. So if you're watching currently and you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button right now. Smash that like button, as Kevin would say. All right, cool. Thanks, guys. Does someone want to close us in prayer? I can do it. Okay. All right. Okay. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, thank you so much. We are so grateful for this awesome conversation and all the great questions. We're so grateful for the engagement from the guys. That is just so beautiful. And from the women too in the chat, we're just really grateful that people in our community care about these topics and that they're interested in hearing us talk about them and that they're interested in engaging with us on them. That is such a gift. And we are so grateful to you for that. We ask that as we, head into our week, that you inspire us in all of the things that we discussed today, that you inspire men to be particularly respectful of women, that you inspire women to be respectful of men in the way that we dress and in the way that we carry ourselves. And we ask that you just inspire each of us in our hearts to just be gentle with each other, just be gentle with the other person and always assuming the best and hoping the best for each individual, and never forgetting that the worth of the human being is not based upon their outward appearance. So we're grateful for these truths, and we ask you to just really set our hearts on fire for these truths. And as always, we pray for a resolution to the coronavirus situation. We pray that we can all be together again in community soon. And we also pray that we can be with you, united with you in the Eucharist very, very soon as well. And we ask Our Lady to intercede for us. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee.
The Lord is with thee.
Blessed art thou
Blessed
among
art
Blessed art thou
women,
amongst
blessed is
women,
the
and
fruit
Blessed
of
blessed
is
is
the
the
fruit
fruit
of
of
thy
thy
womb,
womb,
Jesus.
Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of
Mary,
God,
Mother of
pray for
God,
us sinners,
for us sinners,
now and at the
now
hour
and
of
at
our
the
death.
hour of our death.
Amen.
Amen.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Great, guys. All right. I'm going to close it out. Bye, guys. See ya.
Have a good night.
Bye, guys.